So this is my review of chapters 3 through 5 for The New Meaning of Educational Change by Michael Fullan, as well as 2 articles that we are asked to apply Fullan's thoughts to. So he starts out in chapter 3, which is insights into the change process, by talking about drivers. What are the drivers for change? Usually policy of some sort, and goes through and says negative drivers and positive drivers. For example, I just put one on here. Pedagogy is a positive driver, whereas technology is not going to be a positive driver because it only has small impacts and doesn't change entire systems and things like that. He also goes through and gives 6 elements of successful change, and the first one he's got is closing the gap. This is the achievement gap, but he discusses, rather than just closing the gap, actually bringing everybody up and increasing everyone's performance. The second one is successful strategies and are socially based and action oriented. So these strategies need to have some action associated with them, as well as the backing and support of people and based on social and cultural norms. The third is build capacity, which we learned in his previous book, The 6 Secrets, that you've got to build an organization, and that takes time. Fourth is leveraging leadership. Feeding into and building leadership is super important for change. Internal and external accountability is the next thing that he talked about. Not only are schools accountable, but societies are accountable for the education of their young. And he goes into different details about that. And then evolution of positive pressure, making things change in a positive manner and having them continue on year after year with that positive pressure of continuing to change. Chapter 4 focused on the process of change, which is really initiation, implementation, and continuation. And here is a figure from the book. And basically, the outcomes are hopefully student learning and organization capacity. So initiation, we have to make a decision to make a change. We see that a change is needed and that we're going to make one. Implementation is actually making the changes usually. And then continuation is the change becomes the norm, basically. Becomes the normal thing. It's not really a change anymore, which is kind of cool. So this is how real change occurs. Reform. So the next chapter, planning, doing, and coping with change. A couple of interesting things he said about planning to begin with were that planning fails because of not considering local context and culture, as well as not taking action. Too much focus is done on the planning end of things and not enough on the what are we going to do as a result of the plan, the action part, which I felt was really interesting. I do feel like that is a lot of education. We plan until our faces are blue or until we're about to retire, and then it's someone else's problem. Then they come up with a new plan, and this is why it surprises me with politicians and things, because even though we may have some different folks in places of power, it does take a really long time for anything to be implemented in education, it seems, and I think it's because we're planning the whole time. reposition planning is something that he talked about, which may be the case, particularly if you're trying to build capacity. You may have to change the plan according to the folks you've got on board. Doesn't mean that you're getting rid of the plan. I think that's why he used the word reposition. But you are looking at different options related to the original plan. Cope with change. Folks have got to be able to cope with change, deal with change. Excuse me, remember that it's not the most popular thing to do, change. And he then goes on and gives 10 do and don't assumptions related to educational change, which are pretty good and pretty entertaining. I could be here all night talking about this chapter, so I didn't want to include that in this presentation, but he gives some great advice for educational systems wanting change. So the 2 articles that I reviewed related to Fullan's book, I looked at the game-based learning, so I think it's interesting and cool, and I've seen it in schools, and I like the science component, of course. Relating to Fullan, particularly, this reminded me of professional development, investing in teachers. Also building capacity of teachers with something new and fun and innovative to use pedagogically. And then also allowing technology to assist in a change, but not be the driver of change is what this also reminded me of. I think that for this particular instance, their implementation and the way that the change was presented may need some updating for the next time, but overall I think it was a pretty decent, well-received change, and not bad for what it was initially. The second article I looked at, ICT, is what it talked about, which is communications technology, basically. It was a good idea, and definitely is something to be implemented. But in this particular case, the implementation was that it just wasn't social enough, and that it needed to be replanned. There was not enough input from different stakeholders, is what it sounded like, which is a big importance. And also the implementation needed to be more practical. I guess it was a little too abstract for everyone to kind of get on board. So those are the 2 articles and how they relate to Fullan. And here are my resources. And that's it. Have a great night and keep on reading.